The palace of Zerael stood high like a mountain made of gold and glass. Inside, guards stood silent like statues, and no one dared to speak unless spoken to. And above all, in the tallest tower, lived the one they all feared, the alien Queen Jera. She was known across the galaxy for her beauty, her power, and her cold heart. Some said she never smiled. Others said she didn't even have emotions. But there was one thing everyone agreed on. The queen never felt what others called passion. In her world, the word climax was just an old myth, a legend told to entertain fools. Many tried to please her. Many tried to win her heart. All failed. The queen remained untouched, unsatisfied, and untouched by any desire. Her royal scientists said her kind had evolved beyond such things. And the queen believed them until a human was captured. The guards dragged the human into the palace like trash. He was tall, dirty, and bleeding. But still, he looked around with sharp eyes. His name was Ryan, a human commander from Earth who got lost during a mission. He had survived on a dead moon for weeks before being found by the queen's forces. Why bring him to me? Jera asked her advisor coldly. He's just another prisoner. But the advisor bowed and said, My queen, he is different. He spoke of something ancient. Jera narrowed her eyes. What did he say? The advisor hesitated, then whispered. He spoke of emotions, of connection, of something called climax, my queen. He said it is real. For the first time in years, the queen sat up straight. Her heart, normally quiet, beat just a little louder. Bring him to the observation room, she said, her voice sharp. No guards, no chains. I want to see him. Alone, Ryan was thrown into a room with soft lights and smooth walls. He stood there calmly, not even trying to escape, when the doors opened and the queen entered. He didn't kneel. He just looked at her and smiled. Jera stopped in her tracks. That smile, it made something twist inside her chest. She shook her head and said, You are bold for a prisoner, Ryan chuckled. And you are curious for a queen. The guards outside almost gasped hearing that. But Jera didn't order his death. Instead, she stepped closer. You spoke of climax, she said slowly. You claim it is real. Ryan looked into her eyes. It's not just real, it's everything. You've never felt it? Jera felt her face burn. No, she said simply. In my world, it is a lie. My kind do not feel such things. Ryan walked forward, just a step. Then maybe your world has forgotten something important. That one line struck her like lightning. She stared at him, trying to find anger, but all she felt was confusion. Why didn't she feel the usual coldness? Why did this human's words stay in her mind like a song that wouldn't end? She turned away, hiding her face. You will remain here, she ordered. I want to study you. Ryan leaned against the wall. Relaxed, you don't need to study. Me, you need to feel. The queen froze. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not without fear, not without bowing. She walked out quickly, her steps faster than usual. Outside, her advisor followed. My queen, shall I prepare the usual tests? No, she said quietly. No needles, no scans, just let him stay. That night, she sat in her private chamber. Her hands trembled slightly as she remembered Ryan's words. She touched her own face in the mirror, trying to understand what was this strange feeling. Why did her body feel warm? Why did her heart beat faster when she thought of him? She didn't know it yet, but for the first time in her life, the Queen of Zerael was changing. Not because of power, not because of war, but because of a single human smile. Somewhere deep in the galaxy, fate had stirred. And everything the Queen believed was about to be shattered by the one creature she once thought was beneath her, a simple human male. Asterisk, the guards whispered among themselves that morning, saying the Queen had left the observation room without a word. She never did that. She always gave orders, punished someone, or demanded reports. But yesterday, after meeting the human, she walked away silently and locked herself in her chamber for hours. Ryan sat calmly in his room, not a prisoner's cell, but not luxury either. He wasn't chained, but he was being watched. He didn't mind. The walls were strange. The air smelled of flowers and metal, but his mind was on the queen. There was something hidden behind her sharp voice and cold stare. Something she was trying hard to control, and Ryan wasn't sure yet what it was, but he had seen it. When the doors slid open again, the queen stood there. She wore no crown this time, only a simple black robe. Her face was calm, but her eyes were burning with questions. "You're awake," she said, almost too softly. Ryan nodded. "Couldn't sleep, new bed." She stepped into the room, alone again. No guards, no scientists, no advisors. Just her and him. "You said something yesterday." She spoke as she walked closer. "You said it's not something to study, but something to feel." She stopped just a few feet from him. "What did you mean?" Ryan looked at her carefully. "Your people forgot what it means to be alive, didn't they?" She blinked, surprised by the words. He continued, "It's not about pleasure alone. It's about warmth, closeness, connection, trust." Jera tilted her head. "My kind do not trust easily." "Neither does mine," Ryan said with a small smile. "But we learn, one person at a time." She walked to a table and touched a glass orb resting there, her fingers moving slowly. "There was once a story," she began, "an old tale hidden in our temples. It spoke of a time when queens would melt under the touch of one they loved. But it was declared false, a distraction." She paused, her hand still on the orb. "They called it the myth of climax, a fantasy of the weak." Ryan stood up, taking a slow step forward. "And what if it's not a myth?" She looked at him sharply. "And what if it is?" "Then nothing changes," Ryan replied calmly. "But if it's real, everything changes." Jera stared at him, and for the first time in her long rule, she didn't have an answer. Her heart was beating again in that strange new way. It wasn't painful, but it made her chest feel full, like something was trying to break free. "You do not fear me," she said, more to herself than to him. "No," Ryan replied gently. "I feel sorry for you." That word, sorry, stung her more than any insult. But it wasn't cruel, it was honest. And that made it worse. No one had ever pitied her. No one had ever seen her as anything but powerful. She turned away, her eyes suddenly wet, her hands clenched. "I want to feel it," she whispered so quietly that Ryan almost didn't hear her. "I want to know what it means to melt, to burn, to tremble, like in the old tales." Ryan took another step closer. She didn't stop him. He reached out slowly and lifted her hand in his. It was cold, trembling slightly. Her eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "You don't need machines or scientists," he said softly. "You just need to let go." The moment stretched between them, heavy with something unnamed. Her eyes locked with his, searching for a lie, but she found none. And when he placed her hand gently over his chest, where his heart was beating strong and steady, the Queen of Zerel felt warmth travel up her arm. Not heat from a fire, not energy from a device, but something alive, real, and terrifying. She pulled her hand back quickly, as if it burned. Her breath came faster, her eyes blinking too quickly. "Enough," she said. Though her voice trembled, "You will stay here. No one will speak to you but me." Ryan nodded without resistance. As she turned to leave, she paused at the door. Without looking back, she said, "Tomorrow you will show me what it means to trust." The door slid shut behind her. She stood there, leaning against it, her heart pounding. She didn't understand what was happening. But one thing was clear: something inside her had woken up, and it wanted more. She didn't sleep that night. The stars outside her window looked the same as always, cold and endless, but something inside her had changed. Queen Jera sat in silence, feeling her own fingers as if they belonged to someone else. They had touched a heartbeat, a real one, not just numbers on a medical screen. She had held his warmth, and now her own hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the early morning, when the moons of Zerel were still low in the sky, she walked quietly into the room where the human was kept. She didn't wear her royal robes or golden rings, no armor, no crown, just a soft gray cloak and bare feet. Ryan was already awake, sitting cross-legged on the floor like he was in a temple. When he looked up and saw her, he smiled again. That smile made her forget the words she came to say. "You're early," he said. Voice low and calm. "I couldn't wait." She replied honestly, surprising even herself. He patted the floor beside him, and she hesitated only a second before walking over and sitting down. The smooth tiles were cold, but she didn't mind. She looked at him with steady eyes. "Teach me trust," she said simply. Ryan nodded slowly. "All right. First rule, trust is not something you command, it's something you allow." She frowned a little. "Explain." He reached out his hand toward her, palm up. "You don't have to take it. But if you do, it means you're giving me a little piece of yourself." Her eyes narrowed, unsure. "I am queen. I don't give pieces away. You already did." Ryan said softly, "Yesterday, when you touched my heart," her fingers twitched. Remembering the feeling, her pride told her to pull back, but something stronger whispered to go forward. So she placed her hand into his, just for a moment. Was warm again, just like before, but this time it didn't scare her. It made her feel safe. They sat like that, silent, hands touching. The Queen of Zaral and the human from Earth. After a long pause, she asked, "Is this trust?" "This is the start of it," Ryan answered. "But real trust is built when someone could hurt. You doesn't." She looked down at their hands. Her voice was barely a whisper. "I could crush your bones, and no one would stop me." "I know," he said, with no fear in his voice. "That's why this matters." Her grip loosened, and she slowly let his hand go, not because she was afraid, but because she didn't want to break the moment. It felt too rare, too fragile, like a dream made of glass. Later, they walked through the Queen's private gardens. No guards followed. Just shadows of old statues and the sound of soft alien wind. Jera told him stories of her ancestors cold. Rulers who built an empire through war. She never realized how bitter those stories sounded until she said them out loud. Ryan listened, never judging, just watching her closely. It made her speak more and more, until she forgot she was supposed to be quiet, until she forgot she was supposed to be untouchable. And then he asked the question she didn't expect. "Have you ever wanted someone to care for you, not for your title, but just for you?" She stopped walking. Her answer didn't come quickly. "No," she said finally. "I didn't think it was possible." "Now?" he asked gently. "I don't know," she whispered. "But when I'm near you, I wonder." The wind carried the scent of strange flowers, and for a moment, she looked almost human. Her eyes were softer, her voice lower. Even the stars seemed to watch her in silence. That night, she sat alone again, but her fingers remembered the shape of his hand. Her mind remembered the sound of his voice, and her body. Her body started to feel things she couldn't explain. She tried to focus, tried to meditate, tried to shut it all down, but it was useless. There was a hunger now, not for food or power, but for something new, something she'd never known before. She didn't want to control it, she wanted to explore it. And so, for the first time in her life, the Queen of Zeril made a decision not based on strategy or law. Tomorrow she would not come as a ruler, she would come as a woman. And she would ask the human what came after trust. Asterisk, the Queen opened her eyes in the middle of the night. Her breath was shallow, her skin warm, and her heart pounding louder than the silence around her. For a moment, she thought she was sick, but she wasn't in pain. She was burning from the inside. She sat up in bed, her silk sheets clinging to her like vines. The moonlight from the twin moons spilled across the room, painting her skin in silver. She touched her chest. Then her lips, they were shaking, and she didn't know why, or maybe she did. Her dreams had been filled with images, not of war, not of glory, but of him, the human, Ryan, his voice, his touch, his breath near hers. She had dreamed of him saying her name like a secret, and in the dream, she had wanted more. It was terrifying and beautiful. The Queen of Zerael was trained from birth to be strong, to never rely on anyone, to never need, never want, never crave. But now, she was doing all. 3. By morning, she didn't wear her cloak of power. She walked with no guards, no symbols, no rules. Just herself unmasked, unsure, and fully alive. She entered his room quietly. Ryan turned and smiled the moment he saw her. But today, her smile returned, small and slow. Like dawn breaking through clouds, he stood up, sensing the change in her. Energy, something about her eyes was different. They weren't sharp like blades. They were soft, like the edge of sleep. "I dreamed of you," she said, her voice low and real. Ryan blinked, surprised, but didn't speak. She walked closer and looked up at him. "I felt things I didn't know I could feel." He didn't interrupt. He just waited like he knew. "This was something sacred. In the dream, you were near me," she whispered. "And my body." It responded. I woke up shaking. Ryan stepped closer, slowly, as if approaching a wild animal. "Jera," he said gently. "What you're feeling, it's natural. It's your body remembering something your mind was told to forget." Her lips parted slightly. "My people call it madness," he shook his head. "It's not madness, it's longing." She swallowed hard. "I don't know what to do with it." "Feel it," he said softly. "Let it guide you, not rule you, just feel." She reached out and placed her hand on his chest again. But this time, she didn't pull away. Her palm rested over his heartbeat. And she closed her eyes. It was steady, warm, real. And suddenly, her body responded again. Her breathing quickened, her lips trembled, and a soft sound escaped her throat. A sound no one in her species had ever heard before. She opened her eyes in shock. "What was that?" Ryan smiled. "That was the beginning." She didn't speak for a long time. She just stood there, touching him, letting the heat build and wrap around her like fire and water mixed. And it didn't hurt. It made her feel alive, but deep inside. A new fear started growing. If she gave in to this feeling, what would happen to her control? What would happen to her image, her rule, her legacy? Would her empire accept a queen who trembled for a human? Or would they turn on her? She looked up at him. "I'm scared," she admitted, the words tasting strange on her tongue. She had never said that out loud before, not to anyone. Not even herself. Ryan nodded. "So am I, but we don't have to be alone in it." Something inside her broke and rebuilt in the same moment. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against his. No crown, no armor, no lies, just two creatures, standing on the edge of something ancient and unknown, and for the first time in her long and powerful life. Queen Jera whispered the truth. "I don't want to be strong tonight." Ryan placed his arms around her gently, and she didn't resist. Her body melted against his, soft and warm and shaking. Her breath caught in her throat, her skin heated. Like firelight, she didn't understand it fully, but she didn't care. She just wanted to feel it again and again. That night, she didn't return to her throne. She stayed with him, and under the alien stars, her body stopped obeying old laws. It started answering something deeper, something no science in her empire could ever explain. The door closed behind her, but she didn't hear it. The world outside faded like fog. Inside this quiet room, time had no meaning. There was only breath, warmth, and the space between two people who were no longer strangers. Queen Jera stood still, her back to the door, her heart beating so loud she thought Ryan could hear it. He said nothing, waiting, not as a prisoner, not as a subject, but as someone who understood. She turned slowly to face him, but her expression was not the same cold mask she wore before. It was open, unsure, and soft in a way she had never shown anyone. "I don't want to study you anymore," she said quietly. Ryan took one step forward. "Then why are you here?" She lifted her eyes, glowing faintly in the dim light. "I came because I want to feel, not for science, not for curiosity, just for myself." The silence after her words felt heavy, but not with fear. It was full of something deeper. Longing, maybe, or trust, or both. She stepped toward him again, and this time she didn't stop. Her hand reached for his chest, not with force, but with need, and he allowed it. Not with pride, but with care, she whispered. What happens now? Ryan reached up and gently moved a loose strand of hair from her face. His fingers brushed her skin like falling leaves. What happens now is what your heart is ready for. Her breath caught. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be, he said. I'll move at your pace. But she shook her head slowly. No, I've waited too long. I've been empty for too many years. She looked up at him again. And this time her voice didn't shake. Touch me like I'm real. His hands moved gently, his fingers tracing the outline of her arms, her shoulders, her waist, and with each touch, her breath grew deeper, her skin warmer. Her body leaned into his without thinking. Jera had never allowed anyone close enough to see her like this, but now she wasn't thinking about power or rules or eyes watching from the dark. She only thought of his hands, his breath, the way her name sounded in his voice. When their lips finally met, it wasn't like in the old tales. It was better because it was real. It was hesitant and messy, but it made her heart flutter like it had wings. She clung to him, not because she was weak, but because she didn't want the moment to end. And as their bodies came together, she felt her skin ignite. But it wasn't pain, it was a wave rushing through her like starlight and thunder. Her fingers dug into his back, and her voice broke into a sound that had never left her lips before. A cry, not of fear, not of anger, but of something so deep it had no name in her language. She pulled back, eyes wide, chest rising and falling like she had been underwater. She stared at him, shocked, overwhelmed, trembling. And for the first time since the age of 5, Queen Jera began to cry, not because of sadness, but because she had touched something once believed to be a myth, and now she knew it was never a lie. It was never madness. It was truth. Her voice shook as she whispered, "It's real." Ryan held her face in his hands, his eyes full of something even stronger than desire. "Yes," he said, "it always was." She collapsed into his arms, her strength gone, but her spirit finally whole. Everything she had ever known about her race, her throne, her empire, it all faded in that moment. What mattered now was this: the fire in her chest, the storm in her breath, the joy in her tears, and the man who gave them to her not with force, but with care. She had conquered planets, silenced rebellions, and ruled for years without feeling a single heartbeat worth remembering. But now, here in the quiet, in a room with no guards, no crowns, no fear, she found what her ancestors said was lost forever. She found herself. And she found it in the arms of a human male. Asterisk whispers spread through the palace like wildfire. The alien nobles gathered in secret halls, voices sharp with anger and fear. "The queen is weak," they said. "She has fallen to a human." Such words were unthinkable. Blasphemy even. Jera heard them, though no one dared speak them to her face. Her body still burned with the new feeling she tried to hide. But now, danger came not only from inside, but from outside. One night, as stars blinked silently over Zeral, an alarm screamed through the halls. Assassins had come for Ryan. Silent killers sent by those who wished to restore the old order. Their weapons were cold, and their hearts colder. Jera raced to his room, her cloak flying behind her like a shadow. She burst through the door just as a blade aimed for Ryan's neck. Without hesitation, she raised her own sword and blocked the attack. The clash of metal echoed like thunder. The assassins hesitated, stunned by the sight of their queen defending the human. But she did not waver. Her eyes burned brighter than ever, fierce and alive. "I choose him," she declared, voice ringing through the chamber. "If you want to take him, you must take me first." The assassins exchanged uneasy glances and then withdrew silently. Jera lowered her sword, her chest heaving. She looked at Ryan, who was shaken but unharmed. "You are my consort now," she said firmly. "Whether my empire agrees or not." Ryan reached out, taking her hand. "I am honored," he said softly. Together we face what comes. Outside the room, the palace buzzed with rumors and fear. Some called Jera mad, others whispered of rebellion, but no one could deny the change in her. The queen who once ruled with icy distance now moved with passion and purpose. Her empire was on the edge of a new age, one where love and power would fight for the same throne. And the outcome was still unknown, but in the quiet moments, away from all eyes, Jera and Ryan found strength in each other, a bond forged not by duty or fear, but by trust and fire. And as the stars watched silently above, a new story began. One of courage, change, and a love that could conquer empires. The throne room was filled with silence. The grand hall that once echoed with commands and fear now waited for something new, something no one expected. Queen Jera stood before her empire, her crown shining under the great lights. But beside her, not a soldier or noble, a human stood. Tall and proud, not as a prisoner, not as a subject, but as her equal. The nobles whispered and stared, shocked and unsure. How could this be? A human, once their enemy, now the chosen one beside their queen? Jera's voice rang clear, steady and strong. I have walked through darkness and silence, but I have found light, not in power or war, but in truth and trust. She looked at Ryan, and his calm eyes gave her strength. Together they faced the crowd. Together they would lead the future. The myths were wrong. Climax, feeling, love, these are not lies. They are the fire that burns inside us all, even in a queen. The crowd was still, but slowly some heads nodded. The old ways were breaking, new paths were opening. Jera smiled, a real smile, warm and bright. For the first time, she felt whole, not just a ruler, but a woman. Ryan took her hand, and the crowd saw something deeper, not weakness, but courage, not fear, but hope. And as they stood together, the galaxy watched, for a new era was born that day, an era where hearts could beat freely, and love could conquer all. Queen Jera whispered softly, just for Ryan to hear, you didn't just teach me to feel, you taught me to live. And under the endless stars, their story became legend, a story of a queen, a human, and a love that changed the universe.